Hey there, welcome. My name is Rebecca, and I am here to continue the conversation with Peter Callahan, who is the Leadership and Engagement Director at Copper Beech Institute. He recently joined us for a conversation about focusing on what matters, dealing with clarifying decision-making. And thank you so much, Peter, for joining us then and now. What a big topic. You know, we make decisions every day. Some are tiny, some are bigger, some are life changes. So when we talk about clarifying decision making, what comes to mind for you? Why is that topic of interest to you? What keeps that in the forefront for you?
Yeah, thanks so much, Rebecca, for having me back. Great to be here with you. And yeah, this really is, I want to say one of my favorite topics to talk about, but it's almost like it's so useful. I think I come back to, and it's part of sort of why I love coaching as well, is like there's a utilitarian aspect of like, well, and you made this point earlier before we started rolling that we're all making many, hundreds, if not several thousand decisions every day. And what comes to my mind is sort of part of my early journey was recognizing, well, we can make like those decisions or inflection points are going to come up. We can either make them consciously or unconsciously. And it's not to say that every moment in life has to be conscious, right? You made this point as well that, if we were fully present for every one of those decisions and really weighing all the options, like that takes way too much brain energy. So it's really important to sort of mitigate how many important decisions we're making and how we go about doing them. So it just feels inherently practical for me to examine the process a little bit, just so that for myself, at least, I can be more clear on what approach to decision making actually makes the most positive impact on my life, my well-being. I was doing a lot more unconsciously before sort of finding mindfulness practice and doing the personal growth and learning I have been. And when I sort of ask my ultimate coaching question, how is what you're doing working for you? For me, it was not great. So it felt worth putting some energy into examining it to see, all right, can I make this a little bit more useful for myself? So we can get some practical examples. Maybe it'll be helpful.
Yeah, and kudos for being honest with yourself, right? Sometimes we make decisions and we just do it. And others, maybe what we're having for breakfast or dinner, we can plan ahead and take some of that weight, to your point. But maybe those medium or large decisions, how does mindfulness play in, or awareness, or even thinking about your motivations? Like, what are some tips you can offer to people about how to set themselves up for longer term success in some of those medium or large decisions?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, if it's helpful for many of us, the research behind this, I sort of was what helped bring me in. I felt like I read many, many books that referenced, all of this is about training our minds and our bodies to be able to respond instead of react, especially in these more important decisions like we're talking about. So just knowing that there is a ton of evidence that speaks to sort of our attention, our mind being a muscle that we can exercise and train. And just like exercise, if you want to run a marathon, it's not really helpful to go for a long run 2 or 3 days before, right? You need weeks of training and practice. And it's the same thing with mindfulness, or attention training is another way to think of mindfulness, just training, being intentional with our attention, or letting our moods, our emotions just kind of control us and yank us around. That's that reactive part. So just sometimes the process of taking one deep breath, super simple, we hear it all the time, right? Or just feeling our feet on the ground, feeling ourselves sitting in the chair, just those few moments, what that actually is doing as we sort of notice whatever's here in our current experience, it actually helps to regulate our nervous system. So we're giving our body these signals that we're safe and everything's okay. That actually allows more energy to come, more prefrontal cortex in our brain, which is where we make our decisions, that executive functioning. It diverts more energy to that so that we can use more information and ultimately, hopefully, use our values to make our decisions, the things that are most important to us, rather than the conditioning and all the inputs we've had from friends and family and society, most of which are well-meaning, I think, but sometimes when we check in with ourselves, how is what I'm doing working for me? Well, not great, but I feel so pulled to keep eating fast food because I don't feel like I should take the time to chop up vegetables, or, I should say yes to all these meetings, even though it's really taking away from my ability to focus and get my work done, because I feel like I'm supposed to always say yes to my boss. All these kind of things, they take some energy to grapple with, but if we do a little bit of work at a time, we can kind of chip away at these sort of things, which is why I actually really believe in coaching, or having sort of a third party who's not a friend or a colleague, so you can bounce these things off of, right? And sincerely, kind of kindly or compassionately hold up the mirror, show us sort of, oh yeah, that is how what's happening for me, without judgment, but just so that we can have this clarity. To your point earlier, it takes courage to be honest with ourselves, but then what are the ripple impacts of that in the rest of our lives?
Yeah, and it's one thing to be honest, and it's another thing to act on your honesty too.
Right. But I think it's like awareness creates choice, right? So that awareness is the first step. We get to decide what to do with increased awareness. So
Yeah,
little baby steps, like we said.
absolutely. And what I hear and what you shared too is, I don't know, we humans have this gift for sometimes making things more complex than they need to be. So the power of a breath, the power of just slowing down. Why do you think we're so resistant to that? That we rather be moving in chaos and feel like that's more productive than slowing down, taking a minute? Any thoughts on that big question?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I mean, I guess the easy answer in knots is the conditioning. It's just this messaging. I mean, I could go back through what I know of sort of our history of sort of trauma passed down through generations, and what's led us to this capitalistic mindset. To your point earlier, it's all really complex. The military actually has this acronym VUCA. So they say, the world is VUCA, right? No plan survives contact with the enemy because it is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So they have this acronym that I love it because it just acknowledges we can't control everything. Like these things there's so much out there. And so, I think we've just conditioning and all these myriad of variables that none of us could possibly have a full awareness of are giving us all these messages. And again, we're not really slowing down and examining them. We're just, well, lots of people have made lots of money, so that must be the right way to do it. And that's, I think, really was the key for me, Rebecca. As I read so many of these memoirs and different books and learned about so many successful people, recognizing that the external achievement, having the money and the power and whatever trappings that they wound up having, how many folks felt like and still feel like, well, I don't feel very fulfilled, right? I'm not finding joy in every day. I have a big yacht, and again, we're hearing that message a decent amount, I think, now too. But to your point, like to actually check in, I don't think we have nearly as many avenues to say, okay, well, I get that it's not all about that external stuff, but then every time I turn on the TV or go to a news station, it feels like I'm still getting that messaging. So how do we, and that's where I think having communities like Connext Exchange, or, having a coach, or just having other people who are really examining their own values and seeing what else might be possible. It is a growing community with a lot of, again, utilitarian, like practical approaches that don't involve incense and candles all the time. I recommend them, but you don't need to, right? There are some pretty simple, just doing this values exercise that we'll share out through this. And, just having other people, again, who are just checking in a little bit more often too, surrounding ourselves with each other, I think is really beneficial. It releases serotonin and helps us sort of stay the course and not feel like we're alone.
Yeah. And again, it just feels like over and over this message of sometimes the simplest way is the best way, or the simplest things. We don't need to overcomplicate it. And I do want to touch on the value piece. You shared a wonderful document that had a list of values and encourages people to think on them, rate what's important to them. And I think that's something that we're all individual, and what's good for you may not be good for me. So in terms of a capitalist society or culture and marketing and what we see, maybe something does work for someone else, but it doesn't work for me. So how do you find your way to include values in decision making? Do they become an anchor, a guidepost? Like, how do you see the role of values?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, they're sort of to your point before, but they're the simplest just format for clarifying what's important, right? So we go through this exercise and circle the words that resonate most with us. And the challenging thing is there's this list of values. They're all important to most of us, right? Family, professionalism, well-being, happiness, fulfillment, success, whatever the words are for you. Like, oh yeah, that's all really important. And yet we can't do all of them all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I think just going through I think a lot of this it's simple, not easy. I think part of going back to sort of our society conversation too, part of the opportunity is to be okay being a little uncomfortable, to sit in discomfort, to sit in uncertainty, right? That's why the military has VUCA. Like, okay, let's just acknowledge this. Like, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. It's not going to be perfect. And yet we're all these incredibly flexible, adaptable, resilient creatures that can handle anything that comes at us. That's one of the things I'd say with a lot of clients, actually. Well, so far, every single decision, every curveball that's been thrown at you, you've survived. I know this. You're sitting here talking to me. And that will continue to happen until the very last one, whenever that is, later today or 100 years from now. So it's like acknowledging, like, I'm more than likely to survive this. So how can I maybe improve my experience through it a little bit more, knowing, or I guess having some faith or some trust that a little bit more intentionality might actually help my both short-term and long-term experience of this to be a little bit more positive, for lack of a less binary term,
Yeah. Yeah, we seem to have a short memory on temporary discomfort.
Yes, and I think I shared the quote from Saki Santorelli that's one of my favorites. He says, transient discomfort is a small price to pay for connection. And I think you can add any word in there. It's a small price to pay for fulfillment, for well-being, for whatever you're looking for. But transient discomfort, it's going to happen. It doesn't have to last very long. Moving toward your grief when you lose a loved one or something like that, it's transient, and that can then, it's really healthy to sit with and allow yourself to feel so that you can move through it, as opposed to sort of lock it in yourself somewhere to either come out or create something less than healthy inside of ourselves.
Yeah. Again, just slowing down, thinking about feeling what you're feeling, then maybe having some thoughts about it after, and noting your values. Those are all so powerful. And I appreciate the clarification to simple, but not necessarily easy. That is an important distinction. So if someone wanted to start training themselves, conditioning those muscles around being more present, being more aware, going inside, tell them how they can get in touch with you to continue chatting about this with you, or maybe pursue some coaching with you, or some mindfulness practices. How can people get in touch?
Of course. Thank you, Rebecca. And I mean, there are millions of wonderful resources out there. So this is certainly not the only avenue. I want to acknowledge all the wonderful humans out there, and all the incredible folks, maybe recognizing too all the indigenous cultures, and especially a lot of these practices come from Asia, and just all the brilliant, beautiful shoulders that we're all standing on doing this work. So just extending that gratitude. And we sent out an email about that through Copper Beech Institute recently as well. So please check us out, copperbeechinstitute.org. We're local here in Connecticut and global on Zoom around the world. You can find me right on the staff page. My email's on there, but it's just peter@copperbeechinstitute.org. And yeah, always happy to just have a conversation, continue the conversation. We have free meditations every day, twice a day. So feel free to put your email in and hop on Zoom with us. We've got a beautiful global community, like I said. So thank you all so much for tuning in.
Yeah, wonderful. And you also do some private coaching if people resonate with you personally, yes?
Yes, yeah. Feel free to reach out. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me today, Rebecca. It's great to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. And thank you all for watching, and cheers to focused, clear decision-making and getting out of analysis paralysis or the wish-washiness of life by just taking that little extra time for yourself around your values. Thanks so much, Peter, and we'll see you all next time.